You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, hello, hello. All right, so my guest today is Julie Reichenberger. She is a licensed professional counselor and the founder of Denver Metro Counseling in Denver, Colorado. Julie's specialties include ADHD therapy, anxiety counseling, depression counseling, trauma therapy, and EMDR therapy. She has extensive training in ADHD, trauma, and suicide prevention and loss, and provides workshops for others in her community, including clinicians, in suicide intervention, risk assessment, and management. In her bio, she says, "My job is to help you settle all that chaos and uncertainty in your head. Help you slow down and get to the core of who you are." Yeah, love that. Okay, so I will offer a trigger warning here. We talk a lot about suicide. I ask Julie to take me through her experience and work around suicide intervention and counseling. We discuss the misconceptions and some of the trauma experienced by those suffering and by those who have lost loved ones to suicide. We also discuss Julie's work in preventing burnout and providing mentoring for new clinicians. And last but certainly not least, we discuss at length her personal experience living with ADHD. All right, lots of stuff here. Okay, so here's Julie. Hey, Julie, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Christy. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. And with that, I'll just start with, why do you do what you do? Why did you decide to become a therapist?
Well, to me, it's funny. It's a funny story. I did not get into this field planning on becoming a therapist. I was kind of a lost, wandering soul. It took me a bit to figure out what I wanted to do in life and who I wanted to be, as I think is pretty typical. But it took me 6 years to graduate from undergrad, and I went to 4 different colleges. And at the end of all that, I'm like, I'm just gonna go to Colorado, and I'm gonna, just find a job there. And when I moved to Colorado, I started working for the health department, and didn't really like the job, but it was a job, and it was an adult job, and I was doing suicide prevention, which I liked that part. But it's a lot of meetings about meetings and more meetings about meetings. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. But all I knew was that if you wanted to move up, you had to get your master's degree. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine from Chicago was like, "Why don't you just move out here, get your master's in psychology, and work for me or work with me?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." So I did that. I went to the Chicago School of Professional Psychology on a whim, and I had every intention of coming back to Colorado right after. Didn't plan on becoming a therapist, but got into my practicum and just really liked it. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed there for 7 years total, and then moved back to Colorado in end of 2012. So it wasn't an intention; it just happened, I guess.
Yeah. And going back just a bit, when you say you worked in suicide prevention, are you talking about from sort of this administrative point of view, or were you working with people who are struggling?
Yeah. So at that time, I was working in the public health side. So it's upstream prevention. So we provided, I was like a grant coordinator. So
Okay.
provided, like I oversaw the grant making process and people applying for funds to do like intervention trainings and suicide awareness campaigns and that
Oh,
kind of stuff.
okay.
Hmm.
I mean, still like, pretty. I don't know exactly like the details, obviously, of what you're doing day to day, and you don't need to go through it, but it seems pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was definitely interacting with people who had struggled with thoughts of suicide, struggled with loss of suicide, having, lost a loved one to suicide. So we had, yeah, just, and people who are just advocates for
Yeah.
suicide prevention.
Have you, now that you've gone back for the degrees and have a practice, is that something that you work with people on and something that someone might seek you out for? Is that an expertise or a, I hate to say passion, but something that you're into?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. I've lost a few friends to suicide at
Mm,
young ages, and just out of curiosity, just kind of got into it and wanting to know more, wanting to feel connected to others who had experienced a loss,
mm-hmm.
and also others who had struggled with thoughts of suicide, as I have at various times in my life. Never anything I've acted on, but it's definitely just, I think, a human experience for many people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I do what that is one of my specialties is working with people at risk of suicide, even just around the trauma of having thoughts of suicide or being hospitalized inappropriately or even appropriately, but just the whole process around suicide comes with it a lot of trauma. I also work with people who have lost loved ones to suicide as well.
What do you wish more people knew or understood about either suicide as a whole or a particular aspect that maybe you you see there's a misunderstanding or a misconception about?
That people would understand that it is complicated.
Mm,
Suicide isn't simple. People don't, oftentimes, rarely will they come to suicide as a choice or an option based on one thing. That doesn't mean, though, that somebody could experience one event and then have thoughts of suicide and may act on those thoughts. Oftentimes, most often the case, people are suffering and they're suffering in silence for a long time, or they just feel hopeless. They feel like they're a burden to other people. Uh, the brain, the it takes over in a way where it starts to justify, I think at times, like
mm-hmm.
everyone will be better off without me, and they'll be fine, they'll be sad for a bit and things will get over. But also times oftentimes I think that people just aren't necessarily like in that crisis, in that period of crisis where someone is acutely suicidal. um, it's a different state of mind, I would say.
Yeah. And you even said, the brain takes over and starts justifying. I mean, I don't have too much experience directly, but in the few instances that are coming to mind, the closest people around them were utterly shocked. I mean, just like had no idea, or at least that's what they were saying, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. If someone, I know this is going to be a hard question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there are there subtleties that friends, family could be looking for or asking questions or anything?
It's complicated,
I
and
know.
it's unique to everybody.
I know.
So I think you can over and under identify somebody who's at risk of suicide. And I think that if you go around being worried that everyone is at risk of suicide or people that you love are at risk of suicide, you're
Yeah.
gonna, really, you're gonna have a lot of anxiety about that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, noticing people. If you notice that something's off with somebody, you feel like that spidey sense in your gut, like, something feels off, just check in with them. You don't have to ask them about suicide right away, but if you are worried about them, I think it's, definitely asking, are you thinking about suicide? Sometimes, I've noticed this about you. I've noticed this change. Are you okay? One of the things that people who are struggling with and even suffering in silence with is feeling unnoticed. And so if if
Mm.
if you're if you're feeling off and you feel like you're really down and you're anxious or you're stressed about things and you just feel like nobody's noticing. And then somebody suddenly one day somebody says, I just noticed something's off about you. Are you okay? I mean, there's just like this sense of, oh gosh, somebody sees me, like I'm not in this alone.
Mm.
And I think that's also one of the, it kind of leads to the idea that people do things like if they talk about suicide or they, you know, are behaving in a way that draws attention to them, that it becomes, oh, they're just wanting attention. Well, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's their way of asking for help or trying to be noticed because they don't have the language to be direct and clearly ask. And also, it's scary to talk about suicide,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've had a negative experience with doing that.
Yeah.
People either shutting down or, you know, saying, "Oh, don't do something stupid like that," or they
Right.
just kind of dismiss it because of their own anxiety and
Right.
not knowing how to talk about it, or they have an even more upsetting experience with it where someone, they threaten hospitalization when it's not necessary in a
Yeah.
therapeutic setting or whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's scary to talk about suicide. Um, and so I think that's oftentimes why people don't. And also sometimes people feel pretty certain that that's what they want to do and they don't want to be talked out of it.
Yeah. And then flipping it now, you know, someone is listening that is now on the other side of that conversation. Is there something that you just a blanket sort of statement or hope for them that you would want them to hear right now? That's a lot of pressure. I'm sorry. I guess what
How
it
can I
is,
say?
I guess,
Yeah.
Julie, what I'm getting at is that I think that these types of things aren't talked about enough. And so to start to normalize these conversations, we have to, in my view, start putting language around it and giving people the language that's appropriate and even if it's not used tomorrow, but just hearing it, just it being out in the world.
That is, I think, one of the hardest things because it depends on where someone is in their struggle with suicide, what message they're able to receive. So you're right, it may not be today, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now, but um, I work with people who, suffer chronically with suicide, which
Mm,
means they have thoughts of suicide pretty regularly. It's just part of their existence. They are still able to find hope and joy and moments of joy in life and find reasons for being here. I would just say find community,
yeah.
find people that you can talk to about it
Mm,
with. There are support groups. They are hard to find, but there are support groups for people who struggle with thoughts of suicide because I think also within the mental health field, talking about suicide is also stigmatized.
mm,
People who go to, like peer support groups or I don't know, even like alcohol, drug and alcohol groups, a lot of times they're told not to talk about suicide because it could be triggering for other people. And so there's no real outlet for people to
wow.
talk about. So you find your people
Yeah.
and then, you talk with them about it. Um, and if you find that that's, you want to find some balance, like I think there's talking about it and then coming out of it, like getting into conversation about it, sharing your feelings, but then also having a way out of it so that
Hmm.
it's you don't just get stuck in it with somebody or just get stuck in it with yourself. The
Yeah.
distraction is good with
Yeah.
thoughts of suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even begin to just talk like think that I could understand that where someone would be at that point, but I do recall it was maybe a year ago. I guess it was a little more so. I was very depressed and I was about to take that step of getting medication and when I say very depressed, I mean here I know I'm gonna do all the things that like I'm not supposed to do, right? Like my feelings are valid and my experience is my experience and the whole thing. But I just really want to make it clear that I was nowhere near life would be better without me here. And I don't want to I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to understand. But I was like trying so hard to feel better that I was in therapy. Talking to my therapist twice a week. I was about to start with a psychiatrist and I was listening to podcasts about postpartum depression. I was on Instagram following therapists, this and that. And I was like, I got to a point where it was just like, enough. Like, I cannot consume
any more content that is related to like therapy or this or that. It was like too much. It was like no, I just need Housewives of New Jersey or something. Like it just was like no, this is overload. And so I as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, like you sometimes you get so deep into anything really, but I can't even imagine when you're already at that state of mind. I think that was good advice. Find a way
Yeah.
out of the thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that also just highlights that not everybody that has depression, even crippling depression, has thoughts of suicide. You know,
Yeah.
like you can have that. It doesn't equal suicide, which I think is a misconception too.
Yeah. So, in doing what you do, how how do you come away from those sessions or those conversations? Like how do you protect yourself? Are you ever triggered? What is that like on your end?
It ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
I I've had one of my favorite days or experiences. I guess I don't even know if that's the right thing I want to say, but um, this was during COVID last year, and everybody was doing telehealth. I was doing telehealth. Everybody, as all my clients that day, probably had a full day. So there's probably 7 people in a row were just really struggling. Many of them having thoughts of suicide, many of them struggling with keeping safe. And, I was in it with them, sitting with them, being present. So what I do is I do a lot of flushing and, like just energetically, like I imagine this
Mm-hmm.
light color moving through my blood vessels, and I'm flushing. And my last client of the day was in such a good mood and was like, I feel so good about things. Like I'm getting, I'm doing this, and this. Like I've never felt so good in my life. And I started crying because like just
Mm.
tears started welling up my eyes because I was like, this is too, this is too happy. I've been sitting in the muck all day.
Yeah.
This is too intense for me. I shifted, but it was just this moment of like, wow, like who would have thought that would have been too, like the happiness in this person would have been, I wouldn't say triggering, but just emotionally
Yeah.
charging for me. But it was just, it's just, I guess, a very clear sign of how much I was holding on to that
Mm-hmm.
day. But I do, it's every day isn't that heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I do a good job of trying to spread people out throughout my week that are struggling more, because I also have to leave space for if they are in crisis, which is
Mm-hmm.
not rare. I have really good boundaries with my clients. They respect my boundaries as well. And, we have solid, plans for safety in place. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is about really building trust in the relationship between us, and that it's safe to talk about suicide with me, and I'm going to honor, their wishes. They are going to honor my obligations, and we're going to work together to keep them safe. And um, but it is, some days I just come home and I'll have the TV on, and I don't even know I don't even realize that the TV's on. I'm like, what's this noise? Suddenly
Yeah.
I'm like, what have I been doing for the last 30 minutes? Like
Yeah.
just sitting here.
Yeah.
Um, but I call my colleagues. I do frequently. Um, I do a lot of, like I said, just that flushing of energy.
Mm-hmm.
What I find, I think when I go into sessions and when I go into work, like it's a mindset and I'm prepared for it. And so I'm doing the things, and I'm human. I am human, and it does absorb inside of me. I'm not going to say I leave everything at work, because I don't. But the longer I've been in the field, the more I'm able to, like I care about these people. I
Yeah.
do think about them, and but it doesn't consume all of my parts. So
Yeah. Well, it's a job.
it's a job.
It's a job. But it's I hate how I just said that because it is more than that.
It is more than that.
You do. Yeah. Go ahead. You'll say it
It's,
better than I can.
I don't know if I will. I'm not really good with words. It is a, it is an, I
It.
mean, this sounds cheesy. It's an honor. I mean, it
Mm,
is an honor to be trusted to sit with somebody in their pain, and
Yeah.
to be a witness to their own progress.
Yeah.
Like I am, it's it blows my mind how, I mean, these people who are suffering so much, and it's not all the time, but they are so strong and they have so much resilience even in their suffering and their pain. And but it is exhausting at
Yeah.
times, and it's also really fun. Like I like genuinely enjoy, the people that I get to sit with every day. Like I enjoy their company. We have a good time even talking about all their pain sometimes. So it's
Yeah.
not all it's not all
Yeah.
all dark and heavy. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think my therapist and I have a good time. You know, we laugh. Sometimes the stupid things I think make us laugh. I mean, it's just, and I
yeah,
say stupid things, but it's like I can say it that way because as soon as something comes out of my mouth, I'm like, I know that was dumb, or like I know I this and that and the other, and we laugh. I
yeah.
don't know. It's
You have to come up for air,
yeah,
um,
yeah. I
is what
like
I
that.
call it. So
Yeah, no, I like that. And it's and going back to what I said I hated about saying, it's a job. Like it's a job, but I just even with my own experience, it's such a unique relationship that I don't
yeah,
know. Like yeah, like I mean, my therapist even said to me one time since we've been doing virtual, she's like, I feel like I've been in your house. Like, like I've seen your kids. I know where your refrigerator is. And she heard my kid asking for something and she's like, "Oh, you're going to get it in the pantry?" And I was like, "Yes, I am actually." Like it's a very oddly intimate yet distanced relationship because I know very little about her, but when we get on the call, it's like, "Oh, there you are. There's my bestie. Great." You know?
yep.
Yeah. So you did also mention that will call your colleagues and things. And I was just looking at your website. There is a decent amount of focus on supporting other therapists.
Yeah.
Why is that important to you? Because I've seen a lot of websites and not all of them have that focus on there.
Because of the work we do. It is,
Because of everything we just said. Yeah.
it's everything we just said, and not everyone, like it is so most people when they go through their training to become a therapist, oftentimes their first jobs out of school are, and even during their practicum, so the hours when they're working towards hours and stuff, for their classes and then to get licensed, um, they are seeing 30 to 40 clients a week. They have maybe 90 people on their caseload that they are trying to manage and take care of while also making very, very little money.
Mm.
Um, and they're oftentimes in like community mental health agencies where you have very high needs clients. So they need a lot of case management. They need a lot of support, not just around therapy, but around I don't know, jobs, helping them find jobs and stuff. And that's not the case for everybody that goes to community mental health, but there's just a lot going on, for a lot of people that go to those agencies. And you have young, new clinicians in the field that are at first excited and then just have, I'm not going to say little support, but oftentimes not as much support as they would get. I don't even know if a different agent, I mean, it's just, there's just this idea that you're expected to do all of this hard, heavy work
Mm-hmm.
and get paid very little for it. And then, so I'm in Denver, Colorado. The cost of living here is so high
Mm-hmm.
compared to wages, and especially compared to what therapists make, that work in agencies. And so burnout. I don't want people to burn out. I don't want people to experience burnout at young ages when they have so much talent and so much in them. They want to give, they want to help people. And if they're not supported, then they burn out and they're not happy. And if they're not happy, then the people that need help aren't getting the help that they need. Like,
Yeah.
I just think it's there's such a big difference for people who are, and I don't think that people that work in agencies are not good therapists at all. That is not what I'm saying. I think that they are not fully supported, and
Yeah.
so much is expected of them. And it's the same in like these, a lot of these, like Better Health and groups
Mm.
where, you can have access to your therapist. I don't know all the details of it, but it's just essentially you have a lot of access to your therapist. There's some limits around that as well, but you know, the pay is also
Yeah.
at the end not as good. And it's not about making money. It is about having quality of life, and
Absolutely.
not burning yourself out, having no energy or no money to live
Yeah.
in a city that you live in. Um, and yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of people also go into the field because they've worked through some of their own stuff, and um,
Yeah.
and so I like to, it's not the case in every instance, but I like to say, oh, you can read someone's bio. Whatever they specialize in is maybe something that they've experienced themselves.
Yeah.
um, but there is some truth to that. It's not true for everybody. um, and I don't think that you have to have experience in um, anxiety yourself to help somebody, to be helpful with somebody. You don't have to have understand the experience of suicide yourself to help somebody with thoughts of suicide.
Hmm.
Same with just a lot of things. So
So a couple of things there. What does that support look like?
hmm so in my practice, so I have a group practice, and we meet on a weekly basis. We do, we talk about just logistics and stuff. I'm sure they love that part. But then we do case consultation.
Okay.
And in addition to that, like, we are, I'm checking in on them.
Hmm.
We have trust with each other where I don't pry into their personal lives, but they'll share stuff with me. And I want to make sure that they are feeling supported in their personal life as well as their professional life. Because if they're not feeling like they are able to take care of things there, and that's not my job, but it's also my job is to help them, like, let's figure out, do we need to move your clients around? Do we need to have more space? Do we need to shift days? What do we need
Hmm.
to do to support you so that you can, work through whatever you need to work through, and whatever that may be,
Right.
if anything. But they're humans.
Yeah.
We're all humans,
Yeah.
and we need to be treated as humans and
It
not
sounds
just
like having,
machines.
yeah, it sounds like it's like you having a mentor.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
yeah,
there to guide them through not only emotionally and all of that with the work, but also a little bit of the word is not coming to me, but it's like almost the like the administrative side, the stuff that maybe they don't teach you in school,
yeah,
about actually being in a practice, about being on, boots on the ground.
yeah.
Because I have to, I feel like that could be pretty terrifying to be just like fresh out of school, sit down and have someone be like, so I'm depressed today. Like, oh my God. Like, you know what I mean? And mostly probably nerve wracking because how many people actually sit down and say I'm depressed? It's like you have to, they're just like, they're telling you all these other things that you have
Uh-huh.
to sort of like weed through. I mean, I just can imagine that is a lot of pressure and a lot of, could be nerve wracking. So I think it's
Yeah,
great what you're doing.
yeah. I just, I see, people go into this field because they want to help.
Right.
I wouldn't have identified myself as a helper, um, but I feel like I'm very intuitive, and I just understand people and connect with them, or just, I don't know, I just have senses about people, and so people have been drawn to me for that, and it's like a gift. It's so funny. Like, I feel like, oh, that's so conceited to say, but it's like, that's just, I know also that, like, woman thing, like, we can't express our strengths, but it's a strength of mine. Um, and I'm going to own it right now, but it's, yeah, like,
Yeah.
so, but so many people in this field have that gift too. And it's squashed. And I don't want people to feel squashed doing what they set out to do, that they love and I don't know. It's just a value of mine, I guess.
Yeah, no,
But
I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's great. Um, and what did you call them? Like the centers, like the where they would be working. What did you call them?
a community mental health agency.
The agency.
Hmm.
Okay. Like as you were talking, it was reminding me of some of the conversations I've had with therapists and counselors who work with kids, and it's reminding me of how they speak about, like the school counselors. It's like they're wonderful, but they're one person.
Yes.
It was reminding me of that. It's almost like it's a
Yeah.
wonderful resource and they're great at what they do, but there's just
Yes.
not enough of them and there's not enough
Yes.
money behind it and they need all the
Yes.
things. Like it was reminding me of that.
Absolutely. Yes, that is exactly what it is.
Okay.
And then I don't think it's
Excuse me.
I don't think in every case it's not an ill-intended thing. Like, it's not, people
No,
aren't
it's
going out
just
like, we're going to underpay these people and overwork them. It's like, it's
yeah.
just what the
It's the
system
system.
isn't set up. Yeah. Yeah.
The big S. The big
Yep.
S. Yeah. And I also made a note of when you were talking about, I don't think that you need to have experienced severe anxiety in order to work with someone who does. Where do you sit on, the whole self-disclosing aspect of what you do? I know some people are like, oh, I do it all the time. Others are like, never. Like, where do you sit with that?
In the middle.
Okay.
I think it's, when appropriate. Yes. I have this process I go through. Is this about me? Is this
Mm-hmm.
about them? Why am I wanting to disclose this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes I disclose something and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was just about me wanting to talk about me for a minute. But
I wish people could have just seen your face as you did that.
yeah,
Hey, you're
but
human.
I am human, and that's more than anything what I try to show,
Yeah.
um, is that I am human, and but I try not to make it about me, and that's, I'm human, so sometimes it is, there's going to be I just have to tell you the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But part of that is about building relationship and rapport as well. Like, I'm not going to tell somebody, my details of my relationships with people. That's not necessary. That's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
I can use examples of, sometimes people in this situation or whatever, feel that way or this way, but um, another specialty of mine is ADHD, and that is one where I will disclose a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
about my own personal struggles with it, and just the experience of what it's like. Again, there's still a fine line and a balance around that, because it's not about me, and even, like, my experience is not going to be the same as everyone else's. Um, but I think that what I have found when I have disclosed that I have ADHD, one of the reasons for that is because I do see myself as successful,
Mm-hmm.
and as somebody that, like, with all the stereotypes out there about people who
Mm-hmm.
have ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you own a business, you have employees, you are a therapist that keeps appointments, like, you are all over the place. I definitely can go all over the place, but they can see that you can be successful.
It's a very misunderstood diagnosis, and I know that only because I've interviewed a friend of mine who spent most of her life not knowing, what was going on, really struggled in school, couldn't, in her view, and I'm going to paraphrase, like everything was like she just couldn't stick anything out. Like she just couldn't get the grades, couldn't stick with an activity, couldn't anything. And it took way too many years for someone to take what was going on seriously and really like look at it and try to help her. And thankfully she's gotten to a point where she's managing, right? But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's probably a lot more people walking around than
Hmm.
we realize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot more women too.
yeah.
Women tend to be underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed, young girls, because more often, because of stereotypes, we
Yeah.
think of ADHD as that boy in class who can't sit still, who's drumming the whole time and, moving around. And um, girls typically tend to have more of an inattentive type. And so they're more quiet, or even just their personality types are maybe not as outgoing. But there's a lot of research out there and reasons why that is. And um, so, yeah, it's,
What does it look like for you? Like, how did you start to know? And even if up to now, like even now, you're like, oh, I'm doing something, and it's like, oh, there it is again. Or what does it look like for you? Forgive my
uh,
ignorance. I,
there it is again.
you know what I mean?
I like that. I like that because it is kind of a, oh, there it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Um, so I was diagnosed in grad school, and my um my mom told me, I don't know if it was before, like after that diagnosis came, that my high school math teacher had at parent teacher conferences asked um, if I had ADHD, or if that had ever been something that my primary care had talked about. And
Hmm.
so it was something that one teacher had noticed, but it wasn't until like I just, a lot of times people who have ADHD learn how to work the system,
Yeah.
because the system doesn't necessarily work for them. And so, we are creative in the ways that we do that, and we get by based on all of our awesome strengths that we have,
Mm-hmm.
of being creative, being tricky. I would distract the whole class when I was distracted. When I couldn't understand the concept, I would just start
Mm-hmm.
distracting the class, because I'm like, if
Mm-hmm.
if I can't get this, no one is getting this. Looking back in hindsight, like I know that's what I was doing, because
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't. It was so overwhelming to me. But and they didn't have the language. We don't have language for our experiences. So um, yeah, I it was in grad school when it's like I was at my peak of my abilities, where I couldn't go any further, where I couldn't skate by anymore. And I don't mean skate by, because it's not just skating by. I think a lot of the imposter syndrome is one of the things that, like, or I feel like I'm tricking everybody, and you are tricking everybody, but you're
Mm-hmm.
also like doing it in an intelligent way.
Right.
You're learning how to do things in a way that works for you. Like none of my assignments had. I couldn't do the linear. I could not tell you how I got from A to B to C to D, but I could get from I could get from A to
Right.
Z,
Right. Right.
and I knew how to do it, and I went all over the place, and there was no order about it, but that I got to it.
Right.
And when you have to start showing or describing how you do that, or you're forced to work in a way that's different than your brain works, and you can't use those anymore, that's usually when people start to say, there's something wrong, or I'm dumb, or I can't get it, or what's wrong with me. And so for me, that was grad school.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say I did not struggle before that with grades and stuff, but I was able to get by with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my magic skills, I'll call them.
It's I don't know. I hear that, and it makes me a little bit angry, honestly. Not at you, of course, but that it's just like I feel so I guess disheartened by what to do. Like, I think you're 100% right. Anyone struggling with ADHD, you're probably smarter than the rest of us. Like, but there's these systems, and there's these boxes, and there's these ways of doing things, especially in schools, that immediately that's the kid that's different. That's the kid that's annoying the class.
Hmm.
To use your example, like
Yep.
you're saying, distract the class, that's a protection for yourself. And meanwhile, I can picture that happening back in
Yeah.
school, and the teacher immediately being like, rolling her eyes, like, oh, it's this one again.
Hmm.
I mean, you start to just put kids, especially, in these boxes.
Yeah.
And then it takes off. It's like, okay, now it gives that kid, when you identify someone as the trouble kid or the distracting kid, oh, well, I guess that's what I am now. And they
Yeah.
like can take on this identity. It doesn't happen all the time. I'm speaking obviously very broadly here, but it's just It's infuriating because I understand to some extent why in schools and then taking it to corporations and all of this, that there has to be like some order, right? Like there's so many people that we have to somehow educate, but everyone learns differently. Like I don't know, it's blowing my mind right now. Like I don't know what to do about all of this because you're not the only one. You're not alone. There's so many
No,
people, and
no.
it's really not fair, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fair. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm annoyed about it now.
I'm annoyed about it. And this is one of the things that we talk about in our sessions, and we laugh and we yell at the frustration, like, oh my God, it's so annoying. But,
Yeah.
like kids are, when they experience not fitting in the box,
Right.
but also not understanding quite why they don't fit in the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that just so hurts people,
Yeah.
and they're told to, with best intentions, like just try harder, just focus more, or just, do it this way, or, then parents sweeping in and trying to, sometimes even trying to like, protect and help them by doing things for them, or getting frustrated with them because they don't know how to tell you what's going on, and or parents coming in and saying, I know the best thing for you, or teachers saying, I know what's best for you, when actually these kids, they know what's best for them. They just don't, they're not given the opportunity, and they don't have the language
Mm-hmm.
to communicate what it is. So I don't know if any of that made sense.
Yeah. Are you, in your practice now, are you mainly working with a certain age group, or who's coming to you?
So I work with adolescents to
Okay.
adults, like
Okay.
older adults. Most of my I've moved away from adolescents more in the last few years, just because as they were, finishing treatment, other people came on and they were adults. So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. I was
yeah,
mostly asking because I keep going back to kids, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe she doesn't ever work with
I don't work
kids.
with kids.
Yeah.
No way. No, I don't work with kids, and there are some really awesome therapists that do,
Yeah.
and that's their stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think for me, just I go there because my brain starts to goes to what do we do about it, and then I go, well, it has to start when they're young. So
it
then
does.
I go there, but I also wanted to say, as you're talking, about kids being the slightest bit different, not fitting in, and then not knowing why, I'm so I'm actually have a lot of hope for the coming generations in terms of how kids are different is just like not being different anymore. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
I was talking to someone recently who works in a high school, and it's like half of the time I call whoever they, like there's no he she anymore. Like everybody's chill, everybody's cool, but in this case, when we're not talking about someone's gender or their sexual identity. We're talking about how someone learns. And that type of different, I would have to imagine where they're going to have most trouble is actually from the adults and not the other kids. Like where they're going to
hmm
see the most judgment and the most um you know
frustration.
yeah,
Yeah,
because the adults are, I'm not saying all adults and all teachers don't care. It's just they're in the system too. They're in the box. They only have
yeah,
so many resources and ways of helping kids. There's only so many hours they can do extra help and this and that. And anyway, I'm all right. I'll get off my
yeah.
soapbox about it now.
Well,
But
it's but also like there's a box. There's a lot of boxes, and I think the parents and teachers are like, well, you need to learn how to fit into this box. Like you
right,
need to learn, because that's how the world is. This is how the world works.
yeah,
And so a lot of my a lot of my work with people is about deconstructing that idea that that's how it
mm,
has to be, but also how do you use your creative skills and abilities to overcompensate for those, or, fit in a way that feels good to you. And how do you create a voice and a story about, for yourself, that it doesn't have to go that way. It doesn't have to look just like that, but you can still be effective and get things done according to what other people's end expectations are. Your process just looks different. It's way cooler.
Yeah. Yeah. So. You're empowering them to, no, that's great. I heard you say on an interview, I wish more people were weird. And I just loved that. I think you had that exact reaction too after you said it. And it came to mind right now because, I think that's really where we're going though. It's or I'd like to say that's where we're going, especially with younger ages, generations, is what's weird,
Yeah.
What's weird?
Mm-hmm.
Who's weird?
I don't know. Just be you. That's what it is. It's just be you. Gosh, if so I took an improv class when I lived in Chicago. One of the things that stood out for me is that you say what's on your mind. You just say what's ever on your mind, because people oftentimes have that same thought, but they just don't say it.
Right.
And those things that, people don't say, when you say it, everyone laughs the hardest, because it's like, yes, I have that experience too. So I'm not saying don't be a comic, but just be you. And when you are you, and you're weird and you're unique, or you're not weird or not unique, I don't know. When you're able to embrace that, it allows other people around you to also let their guard down and be more comfortable doing the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's also really hard to be the person to do it first.
I was just going to say, it sounds lovely and it sounds easy. I just want to snap my fingers, but it's not tricky.
It's tricky. So yeah, I just wish more people would be weird. So that's it.
Do you consider yourself weird?
I'm a weirdo. Yeah, I am.
Why are you a weirdo?
Sure. I don't know. I don't think I'm a weirdo. I don't even know what weirdo means.
I know.
Weird to me is just I think it's just I have learned that when I try to contain my spirit and who I am I'm not sad. I'm just not happy. I don't feel like I'm authentic, and that doesn't feel good to me. And I'm at a point in my life, and I've been here for a while, where I'm not going to settle. I'm going to be respectful. I'm
right.
I'm going to be it's a lot more reserved now than it has been. I've got allergies. But it's fun. It's playful. I like to be fun and playful, and I like to be fun and playful with my friends and my colleagues and people that I trust. And I have had more fulfilling relationships and more meaningful relationships with people when I have started to accept those parts of me and not try to hide them.
When you say you learned to really be your authentic self, how did you learn that?
Part of it is, I don't know, therapy for sure. Yeah. Also finding people who encouraged me to be me, just be you. Who cares what people think? Just be you. Who cares if you said something and everyone looked at you, because they would never say that. Everyone's thinking that, or, and it's not being mean to people, but just part of one of the ADHD, I guess, quirks or things that I have is that I will, I'll say things sometimes before thinking them through. I've gotten better at that over time, but it's really bitten me, I really, and in professional settings, especially in public health, when you're at meetings with people who are really important people, and you learn to keep your mouth shut. But then it's also it's also served me well sometimes. My very first, my first job in suicide prevention, I one of the questions they asked me was in the interview was, and this was like an admin job that I was applying for. And they're like, "Is there anything about the job that you would not like to do, or that you'd have a problem with?" And I was like, "Yeah, if someone comes to me and writes on a post-it an address and gives me an envelope and tells me to mail this letter to this person, I would ask them to do that themselves because I just don't think that's efficient." And I'm like, I am applying for a job right now where you're supposed to do things like that for people, but I was like, I just don't think that I would have a problem with that. So if you want me to mail one letter, that would be a problem for me, but I can do a mass mailing for sure. And after the fact, I mean, the person who hired me had said she thought it was funny
That
and
was it. Yeah.
wanted to work with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
also
and I
like,
think, and when I hear that, I hear exactly what you're trying to say. And I think it's the point that you're trying to clarify is that
yeah,
that was truly your authentic thought. It wasn't
yes,
like, what would be a really clever, funny thing to say to and try to impress her,
no,
because then you're going to come off and sound like a jerk,
right.
But it was
And
truly just what came to your mind, and
right.
you chose to say it, and it wasn't like you said, "I'm above that," you didn't like pre-orchestrate this response. And I think that's the point you're trying to make. It's like you're not being a rude, you're not,
Yeah.
being blunt for the sake of it. It
Hmm.
just was truly it
It
was
was
your
true. And
own organic
it was,
thought.
it was, and that happens a lot. And it's also like, just like socially, growing up with ADHD or even like, being on the spectrum, having, autism, you're the experience that I have and so many people have is like you're looking around to make sure like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I, like, what is everybody else doing? It's like you're constantly checking. So you're like, this idea that we aren't paying attention is like quite the opposite. We are actually attentive to so many more things than everyone else, and we're just hyper aware of everything going on around us, and we're just trying to fit in. And sometimes, our excitement or our anxiety about it or our overstimulation takes the best of us. And I was probably really excited in that interview and nervous and just said what came out. And I was probably like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that after the fact. But,
Right.
like in the end, where it's gotten me is that I know now that, the people that love me and accept me as I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I've formed a lot of really awesome connections with people just based on being me. And so I don't know that I've set out to learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've just learned to come to accept that sometimes I'm going to do things just like everybody. Everybody does things that they don't feel good about, or they say something that they're embarrassed to have said, or maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're growing, right? I mean,
growing, absolutely.
I think I'm hearing a lot that there's too like, just a lot of maturity and
Yeah,
you
so
know,
mature.
well, just a
Yeah,
maturity in being okay with who you are and not caring what other people think. I mean, that's
it was not overnight by any means, and there was a lot of crying, a lot of sadness around it. And
yeah.
I think what's working with people as a therapist, like having clients who struggle with same and different things as me each week, talking to them, hearing their stories.
Hmm.
I just think they are the coolest people. And they are, like, it's just like, why can't you just be like, you're so
Yeah,
cool, like, you're
I know.
so funny, you're so smart, like, you're just like, but the world just beats us down.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, honestly, I think it's also just by seeing them in through my eyes, I can see some of myself in them. And it's
Mm.
like, I just have so much like respect and love and care for them. It's like, I can, because I've done a lot of work, I can I can have that towards myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify, you mentioned throughout that last piece there that you said whether it's the anyone with ADHD or on the spectrum, are you on the spectrum? Is that what you were saying?
I don't identify as being on the spectrum.
Okay. Okay. I didn't think so. I just wanted to clarify. You're just saying from a world point of view that can
Sure.
sometimes
Yeah. People who have,
you relate.
autism as well. Like there's a lot of overlap. Anxiety is, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
hmm
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Because then that was going to be
Yeah.
a whole other hour of questioning, but I won't.
Lots of stereotypes and biases there too.
Yes.
Like, oh, you don't look autistic. What does that mean? Yeah.
Well, right. I was like, should I ask? Should I not? And I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to ask because how would I know? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. And I think that would have been, I'm going to stop that thought because I'm just going to go on a tangent that in thinking about it, I'm going, no, this is for me to say that. It's not about the interview. So I'll just, I'll take your advice.
You can say it.
No, I think we do. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of stereotypes about what someone on the spectrum is and looks like and talks like and walks like and
behaves and yeah.
And if you had said yes, that I would have had a pause moment there.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been like, huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Would have,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, see, that was about me. That wasn't about you. Anyway.
But also, that was cool.
Yeah. I think it needed to be said. Is there anything that you would want to leave people with, what you want them to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I think, find your community, for women, find the women who will help build you up. And if you're struggling, even if you're like just curious about therapy, try it out. And, it's important to, I think, feel connected with the person that you're, paying money to help you. And if you, after a couple sessions, you don't feel like they're a good fit for you, then move on.
Yeah.
But don't give up. If you need help, there are enough therapists out there. There are enough people out there to help you. I also know that it's really hard when you're not feeling well to have or find the energy. Yeah. And so maybe it's, just having an accountability partner, someone who can sit with you while you make phone calls but I don't know. Don't give up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Find your people, create your own tribe.
Yeah.
Be you.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I the only thing I want to say about it is that when I picked up the phone, my therapist and I laugh about this now, the way I approached her, but I had no idea. Like, I just had no idea how it worked. I had no idea what to expect. And I'm always worked in hospitality and retail, growing up. So I'm always very conscious of like not wasting someone's time. And so I just didn't know that you could, like you said, take a few sessions. If it doesn't work out, like, move on. I was very much like, okay, so like, I don't want to get locked in for anything. And she's like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you're in control of this. Like, this is your therapy. And I was like, oh, like, I think before a person, I'll speak for myself, before I had experience with anyone as a professional in mental health, I just sort of had the unfortunate assumption that it would be very much like what I've experienced in medical health. And it was not that at all. Mm-mm. And unfortunately, that is implying that a lot of my experience with medical health has not been warm and fuzzy. And I don't know, I'm not even saying that it should be. It's just when you don't have the experience, you just, you're on your insurance website or you're hearing, it all feels similar until you're in it. And so I just had this like very like rigid, like, we're just going to do a few sessions. Okay. And she was like, whatever, like,
yeah,
it just was funny. And so when you said, excuse me, try it out, you can start, you can stop, you can, it's your deal, it's your journey, it's your gig. Like, you just, you're in the driver's seat.
You are, and you go at your own pace,
Yeah.
and it's also, I think, hard because I think, as a therapist, I'm trying to be very aware of, is my client trying to please me? Are they,
Yeah.
like, are they, like, is it about like, are they making progress? Do they feel like they're making progress? So checking in with them, and, those are important conversations to have. I also know it's really hard for clients to say, like, I think I'm done with therapy, or,
Yeah.
like, so
Yeah.
it's it's not easy, and you don't owe
I
your
know.
therapist anything.
I imagine it
Um,
like feeling like a breakup.
well,
Like,
it can, yeah, but it can feel like a breakup, like,
yeah.
especially if you've seen your therapist. Like, some people will, see the same therapist for years, and, like, they know so much about their life, and it is,
Yeah.
it would be a breakup, and,
Yeah.
and it can be a healthy breakup, and you can learn through that process much about yourself and relationships with other people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Julie, thank you. This was so great. Such a good conversation. I know that I could just keep going, but I won't. So I appreciate your time. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
So, before I say anything, I absolutely must thank Julie for her vulnerability and honesty in sharing so much of her personal story with us. Everything from experiencing suicidal thoughts to coming to terms with her ADHD diagnosis to loving her quote unquote weird, amazing self, and in sharing her values as a business person and clinician. When you just get good vibes from someone? That is Julie. And not that she needs my approval by any means, but I can so clearly see why she is an amazing therapist. Her energy, her passion for the work, and more importantly, the people, her mission to help new therapists, all come down to compassion. She has so much compassion for others, and although she may disagree to some extent, she also has so much compassion for herself. And I think that was a key takeaway for me in this conversation, is that it's one thing to see and hear someone talk about accepting, acknowledging, and loving either their most authentic self, or to be preaching to us that that's what we should do. But it's a whole other thing to just simply feel it from someone. And I think what I'm meaning to say is that in this area, Julie leads by example. And I can only imagine how much value that adds to her work as a therapist and mentor. Another key takeaway is in and around our conversation around suicide. I'm reminded of Shanna Nardone's story in episode 46. She shared how the loss of her brother-in-law prompted her to start therapy and how coping with that grief was unimaginable. There are so many nuances to suicide, and although it is difficult, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And of course, I'm reminded of Diana Simon's story in episode 20, navigating a lifelong search for understanding and meaning, and finally learning that she has ADHD. As a whole, it is obvious that we have a lot of work to do in order to help kids and adults who work, learn, and just simply think and operate differently than whatever this supposed norm is supposed to be. But I think people like Julie and Diana, people who are out in the world talking about it, talking about the weirdness and the awesomeness and the strengths, are so important. And I say weirdness there because that came from the conversation, not because I or anyone else, it just, like we said on the show, it's like, what's weird? Who's weird? I don't know. I'm weird. Anyway, all right. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for listening. I'm out. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.